third of the bank's loans to the dictatorship of General Suharto went into the pockets of his cronies and corrupt officials. That's around $8 billion.
Globalization means that capital, big money, can be moved anywhere at any time without warning. In 1998, short-term capital was suddenly pulled out of Asia, crippling the miracle economy overnight.
When the Indonesian rupiah collapsed from being roughly 2,500 rupiah to the dollar to being what it is now, 10,000 rupiah to the dollar, the costs to Nike for each Indonesian laborer was cut to 25% of what it had been. And Nike got a great discount on Indonesian labor as a result, and did not unilaterally raise Indonesian wages to the same standard they had been prior to the devaluation of the rupiah.
With the economy collapsed and Indonesia on the verge of revolution, Suharto was forced to step down, having already stolen an estimated $15 billion. During his reign of more than 30 years, Suharto had handed out public utilities to his family and cronies. They owned most of the national power grid. Nothing was overlooked, from TV stations to a monopoly on taxis. Driving from Jakarta Airport, you even paid a toll to Suharto's daughter. These unfinished buildings are monuments to corruption on a scale unheard of in modern Asia, to what the World Bank called the miracle economy.
The bank presents itself as an economic development agency focused on the reduction of poverty. But in fact, the bank operated during the entire Cold War as an institution that distributed resources to mostly authoritarian regimes in the Third World that supported the West in the Cold War. So you had the irony of the West claiming that what they were defending in the Cold War was democracy and a certain vision of freedom, but doing so by upholding dictatorships like Indonesia around the world. What they did was they had plenty of projects, some of which surely were valuable, many of which were not. Every one of these projects, from the Indonesian government officials' point of view, was an opportunity to skim, to live a luxurious life, and the accumulated theft over the course of Suharto's new order, roughly 3 decades, was $10 billion that's unaccounted for, out of a total of about $30 billion that was loaned. And when I said to the Auditor General of the World Bank, what if a group of Indonesian citizens or even the government were to challenge the World Bank in the World Court over this loss of money? The citizens who bear the burden of this debt never got the money. Why should it still sit on their shoulders to be repaid? And his response was, we would be bankrupted. And I said, why? And he said, because this has gone on the world over.
I went to Washington to interview the chief economist of the World Bank, Nicholas Stern. I asked him to explain how almost 30% of World Bank loans to Indonesia had been lost or stolen.
We simply don't know what that number is.
Here's your own internal report, August 97. I quote, we estimate that at least 20 to 30% of Government of Indonesia development budget funds are diverted through informal payments to government staff and politicians.
That number was plucked out of the air. Lots of times we have to guess with numbers, and the person who wrote that was guessing. Somebody comes up with a number and it gets recycled. But
a lot of money.
I don't want to dismiss the issue. It's just, let's not get hung up on one figure, which isn't a particularly hard
no,
figure.
but I mean, if it's a third of what the World Bank has put into one country...
No, then it's a serious question. When you have a loan, there's a lender and a borrower, and they share the responsibility in some way.
There's a strong case that has been made by people who've seen this evidence that the World Bank was duped by the Suharto regime, claiming that poverty had dropped to 30 million, and in fact poverty was around 60 million.
Let's talk about the harder figures. The income poverty figures are always the most difficult ones to get your hands on. But I think the illiteracy figures in the infant mortality figures are in this case probably more reliable. And there was some progress during that 30-year period, significant progress, I mean cutting illiteracy by half and so on. That's a very important step forward, so let's not lose sight of that.
In 1997, the World Bank described the economy under Suharto in a famous report as absolutely dynamic, doing everything right, terrific, brilliant. You know, by that time, the whole Asian thing had already started to collapse. It wasn't until the following year that the World Bank, for the first time in 30 years, had anything to say about a regime that is guilty of mass murder. Why was there such a silence that seemed to a lot of people simply to be complicity with this murderous dictatorship?
I think if we look back on our analysis of the economy and the politics at the time, we got a number of things wrong, and we have to understand that. We're going to get things wrong again. Not so many people called the Asian crisis before it happened. We failed along with
That's your job, though, isn't it? You're all economists with fantastic degrees and brilliant backgrounds, and how can you get it that wrong?
We're going to get it wrong some of the time. I think non-economists get it wrong a lot more often than economists. But this isn't a precise game, and there are going to be a number of occasions in the future where we get things wrong too.
So globalization creates debts, and debts creates misery, creates unemployment, creates the crisis, creates privatization, a lot of states' enterprise being privatized. So people will have to pay more to have an access for instance, like health, education. So it's not natural. Debts is not natural. It's designed.
So in effect, the money stolen by the Suharto family is being repaid.
Yeah.
By
us, by the children.
Every day, more than $100 million is transferred in debt repayments from the poorest countries on earth to the richest. The poverty of families like this is paying off Indonesia's huge debt. The conditions of the IMF's latest loan include a reduction in subsidies on certain fuel and food. Half this man's monthly wage of less than £40 goes on medical treatment for his children who suffer from a serious blood disorder. As prices go up, he cannot even afford the special drugs that keep them alive.
Keadaan anak saya yaitu yang pertama dia menderita sakit. Jadi tiap bulan dia harus transfusi darah. Jadi kalau seandainya nggak transfusi darah, dia tiap akhir bulan itu pucat. Kayak sekarang contohnya, bibirnya udah pada putih dua-duanya. Jadi akhir bulan itu mesti harus transfusi darah. Itu udah pasti. Pusingnya bukan kepalang. Ya kalau seandainya saya sakit gitu nggak bisa masuk kerja, ya udah apa boleh buat. Paling kita bisa cari pinjaman buat berobat anak gitu. Nanti setelah kita kerja lagi baru kita bayar gitu. Kita cicil.
Udah mandi kok masih.
Kalau seandainya gitu ya, barang-barang naik, sedangkan UMR gaji gitu naiknya nggak seberapa, ya kita otomatis ya kita serahin diri sama Tuhan aja deh. Mungkin yang jelas mungkin berobat pun kayaknya nggak bisa. Jadi kita pasrah apa adanya. Sebab gimana kalau kita paksain untuk
harusnya setiap pagi anak-anak kasih teh manis, sekarang enggak. Susu juga enggak.
Ya paling kita bisanya teriak sama pemerintah, ikut lewat FNPBI begitu. Kita tuntut pemerintah dengan supaya naikin UMR 100%.
Yang penting sekarang kan alhamdulillah bisa ketemu buat berobat. Biar walaupun kita makan pakai ikan asin, tapi udah alhamdulillah.
In the global economy, one American corporation dominates the world trade in food-grade